Grief does not wait for a convenient time. It shows up in the middle of deadlines, payroll runs, client meetings, and leadership decisions. So, what happens when you're the one carrying the weight of a business and the weight of loss at the same time? And what do you do when someone on your team is going through it and you're expected to lead? Welcome to Biz Help for You, where passionate support and practical guidance help your business thrive. Loss, trauma, and grief can impact anyone at any time, and when they do not just affect the individual, they affect productivity, communication, decision-making, and the overall health of the business. In today's conversation, I'm joined by a trauma and grief coach to talk about what this really looks like behind the scenes. We're diving into how entrepreneurs can navigate their own grief while continuing to run the business, and how to support team members who are going through difficult seasons without overstepping or avoiding the situation altogether. It's an important conversation because how you handle these moments matters, not just for your business, but for your team. So Marcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Candy.
And this is an important topic, but a lot of people don't talk about it a lot of the times too, because as entrepreneurs, we think we have to just do all the things. We could be going through struggles, but the business requires our attention. And so we're just going to power through it, So I would love for you just to say, when an entrepreneur is going through grief or trauma, like what are some of the common ways that it really shows up in their work and leadership, even if they're trying to push through it?
I think with confusion and not being able to keep things in order and systematic, because grief is chaotic and it causes one to really be a little discombobulated. And I feel like and we notice this in our own life, both instances, if you're doing math, which I think your business is a lot of math,
right,
you start messing up some numbers, and you've been doing this your whole life, but all of a sudden you're noticing that there are more mistakes because it's just the grief does come into play, and exhaustion, just tiredness in the midst, and just feeling like you're dragging through and incapable of being present in the space of work or in a meeting. It's a very real situation within the lives of those who are grieving.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I said right before I asked that question too, a lot of times we just have this business that depends on us a lot of times. And, I am also trying to teach people how to have their companies be able to run without them, so they don't feel that they have to do all of the things. But for someone who feels I still have to be here day to day, what are, some of the risks of continuing to just push through the grief, continue working without really addressing it?
Well, first of all, it's not going to end well. I'll just say that, because the body keeps the score of what we do not work through. And that part of them that feels they need to push through is called function, our day-to-day, that actually can go in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And that fight to keep going and to stay busy is really denial of addressing what is happening in your life. And so one needs to stop. When our second son was murdered, we had the Sterling Rose Sanctuary. We actually stopped and just shut down our ability for several months because we needed to step into healing. And so I think in reality, we can either make the concerted effort to do it and do it right and find healthy ways. Or if you think that you're going to be able to do two things and do it well at one time while you're grieving, you're not. It's just not. And I love, Candy, that you teach people how to have their businesses run without their necessity of always being present. We have to learn when we can and cannot be present, give ourselves permission to step away, especially in times of grieving and trauma.
Well, I'm definitely thankful I had that opportunity. I have been going through this myself, actually, and my father had been diagnosed with basically a cancer diagnosis back in November, and I dropped everything, went to help him, and I was there for quite a few months. And actually, we didn't expect him to pass away because he was given where a diagnosis was like, oh no, we're just going to treat this. It's nothing serious. But he had complications from the treatment, and then he passed away. And he passed away on a Sunday. And I ended up sending a message to my team that just said, I'm going to be very hit and miss for the next few days because this was just unexpected. It was a very difficult couple of days, as this happened, and I just need to have some time to decompress almost. And they were like, no problem. Take the time that you need, right? And I didn't feel the pressure to have to be there doing all the things because I had been preparing my business for this. So because this happened as well for me in this instance now too, not just where before I was like, you need to take time off, just to have downtime. But now it's like, what if a family emergency arises? I was thankful to be there. Now I have the passion to teach it too, saying, what if this happened to you? Could you step away?
And I think they're important tools that everybody needs to have, especially if they're running their own business. And for us, we practice what we preach, to be honest. So we tell people you need to step away, you need to make it a priority. We did exactly that. There wasn't even a thought of should we be it, because the reality is we're going to be better coming back in if we are intentional about taking care of and entering into that process and being able to be true to what we need emotionally, physically, and spiritually during that time.
Mm-hmm. So some people are more easily able to like really even feel their feelings, and kind of go through things, and some don't do that as well. So do you think that you see that really in grief too, where someone is maybe having a more difficult time because they just are that way in general, and so it's harder to feel the grief? Or does everyone kind of go through it still and go through the same kind of the grief process?
I don't think everyone goes through the same grief process. And, there's this fallacy that's been going around for years. There are 5 stages of grief. Those actually were the 5 stages of dying
Mm,
by Kubler-Ross. They're not the 5 stages of grief. Not everybody's going to experience that because there are no stages. The
mm,
reality is some people are better equipped emotionally to handle certain things than others based on life experience and their personality. So when people come into the sanctuary, we work with individuals and give them tools, equipping them, and we tell them we give them tools to help them process, whether it's verbal processing, whether it's audit writing, listening to something that they need to process. We by assessing who our client is and what their needs are, because everybody's not the same. So what's
mhm,
going to work for you may not work for someone else. So what
mhm,
we do is we actually tailor what your needs are. And so for people listening, if there's someone that needs to out loud process, they really need to go to a counselor. They need to
mhm,
find someone that they can out loud process that trauma, that grief with, because you want to make sure that you're getting back the feedback necessary for your healing in
mhm,
that situation. And if you're an internal processor, what we tell people who internally process, get a notebook and write out things in your notebook, and then go back and revisit it, and then at some point choose to display this with a conversation with someone,
mhm.
because that's important. So there's two sides, because you have two types, the internal and external processor. You're going to be one or the other. You can have a mix of both, but you're definitely going to be one or the other.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad you touched on that too, because I was thinking too, as entrepreneurs again who are listening, maybe they're in the middle of this loss and they don't necessarily know what they should be doing to take care of themselves while they're still running their business. And so touching on that, like even journaling, or having a counselor, have you found other things too that are helpful for
Yeah.
someone to
Yeah.
kind of give themselves that self-care and permission to grieve while they're
Yeah.
still running their companies?
Yes, very much so. First, permission to grieve. Secondly, get outside. Start walking. Get outside. I mean, and the reason why, because grief becomes very sedentary, and
Mhm,
people don't want to move. They don't want to, because grief makes us sad, and it just
mhm,
kind of closes us off. But we've got to get out, because what happens is the toxins are building in the body. Those grief toxins, get out and walk so the toxins can start releasing, get some fresh air. or go running or biking, do something active. The point is, do something active, even if it's for 15 minutes a day.
Mhm.
It really is a game changer. The second thing is to eat well, Candy, because what happens here is that people start carb eating and having sweets, and it's I need to, that feel good. I want those foods that make me feel
Mhm.
good, but they really don't. Those foods are going to really cause inflammation, because
Mhm.
when the grief comes in, that already with those toxins, it's just going to build the inflammation. It's going to cause you to get sick. Because,
Mhm.
and when we talk about grief emotions, they're a very heavy emotion, and they can get clogged within the body. And so what we want is for people to eat with healthy decisions and make sure that in that process that they are allowing their bodies to have that accessibility to them. Also, getting a massage, very
Mhm.
helpful for detoxification, and drinking lots of water, same thing, maybe with a little lemon water, body detoxifying. And these are things while you're working. Those things you can do when you're working. You can have a good salad with a little grilled chicken on top when you're working, and you don't need to go have the pizza for lunch.
Mhm.
And so it's making conscientious choices. It's also surrounding yourself with people that are speaking life into your life during the time of grieving, and really putting up boundaries around the people that have negative feedback in your life and bring negative energy, because that also adds to the toxicity that you're already experiencing, and you don't need that. So there's
Mhm.
so many things that we try to encourage people to do, surrounding yourself with uh, new activity. And when I say that, I want people to hear me. I'm not asking you to get busy. I'm asking you to do one thing outside of something you've never done. Maybe go walk the beach. Some people
Mhm.
don't walk. Go walk the beach. And the reason why is because they just came out a few weeks ago that we always talk about the being stuck, that they found that there's a part in the brain that gets stuck. How do you unstuck it? How do
Mhm.
you get it unstuck? So what you have to do something different.
Mhm.
So that's why I say do something different than what your norm is. If you normally go for a walk, ride a bike. If you normally
Mhm.
ride a bike, jog. So it's changing things, because then what happens is the brain sends the signal to the body, oh, I'm not going to get stuck.
Mhm. Mhm. That's interesting because I don't know if I've heard about toxins related to grief. Of course, we all know there's toxins in our bodies and all those things. We've heard about detoxification things too, but I don't know if I've ever heard that related to grief. So I found that very interesting that you shared that too. So I appreciate that. But I also wanted to shift from the leader themselves going through grief to those who are leading a team. Like, what are some of the signs that they might see from someone struggling with grief, even if their team member hasn't openly shared it?
I think really not being able to engage, stay engaged, distraction can be a part of that. Some people do wear the sorrow
Hmm.
and the sadness, and detecting a change in countenance.
Hmm.
If they're beginning to maybe at meetings not eat when y'all are eating, or overeat, you can see subtle changes. Terseness can be a part of someone who's grieving. It's not personal. It's
Hmm.
just that's how the body responds. And maybe being quick to express any kind of emotion.
Hmm.
And that's not what this person is characterized by. I think we have to go back to what is the person characterized by, and you start, noticing things. And, a way to inquire gently is just, hey, I've noticed some things going on. Is there something I can do to help your day be better?
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
to open that door for a conversation where they may feel that you're a safe person to talk to.
Hmm. I know sometimes people just don't know what to say either, right? So they're afraid to talk to someone, even especially if they even know someone actually lost a family member, they don't necessarily know what to say. But even in this position where maybe you don't know, but you maybe also feel like, well, what if something happened? I don't want to make it worse by asking, right? Because a lot of times people also think if they bring it up, it's going to make things worse, right? So what would you say to someone then too about maybe even how to have that conversation?
Well, I think if we're just having the initial conversation, or and you don't know, sweetie, is there something going on? Please know that I'm here and would love to talk with you about that. If you do know, I'm aware that this situation happened, and I want you to know there are no words.
Mm-hmm.
But I am here for you if you need for just presence. And say the person, if they've lost a person, and even pets today, that's a family member, speak the name. It's important. You're not bringing the name up and all of a sudden it's triggering them. It's
Mm-hmm.
already present. People always go, well, I
Right.
don't want to say anything because it could bring it up. And I go, no, it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that doesn't want to bring it up, but it's already present. So again, and just being tender, not asking outright details because one doesn't need to know details. If they
Right.
want to share those details, to engage in that and just say, thank you for entrusting me with that. I definitely am going to be praying for you, and I'm here when you need, and I want to give encouragement to you. Um, and if you're a coworker with them, if you can lighten their load,
Mm-hmm.
that's how that then you lighten their load. Hey, I just wanted to come and see. I finished my stuff. I'd really love to take care of that because they're feeling overwhelmed already. So even in those conversations, just as you're building that, they're going to be entrusting more with you as they see you really are there to
Mm-hmm.
have presence with them. And that's
Right.
so important. And I need people to know the wrong things to say are platitudes. The thing to say to someone is, well, at least you have more children, or at
Mm-hmm.
least this, or, well, you know, they lived a long life. Really? I mean, that's not helping because that's hurtful. I mean, seriously, what
Right.
it does is it shuts the griever down
Mm-hmm.
because now you've just really made it a place where they don't have freedom because you just said, well, at least,
Mm-hmm.
and now they don't feel the freedom that it's okay for them to grieve because, well, okay, my dad was 87. Yeah, he had a long, but I miss my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, what is that? So we have to learn that we need to check ourselves before we let words come out of our mouth. That what
Mm-hmm.
we're saying is actually something we would want to hear and that would be healing to us in our time of pain.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you mentioned about the coworkers too, because I was actually going to say too, as again, entrepreneurs, we want to show empathy, but often there are certain things that have to be done by a certain time. And how can we support the employee going through, the things that they're going through, yet at the same time balance the needs of the business and, not put too much on that employee, reach out to other, coworkers that they have too. But like, what would you recommend around that whole part of it?
Well, I can speak from when we had our losses, their company came in and said, you take as much time off as you need, and we're going to have other people cover your accounts and help with things. And they did. And so I thought that was the most gracious thing. And there really wasn't a time on it, but other employees were willing to pick up parts of his work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when we're building great businesses, we're not just there for the finances. We're there to build community and to have that support system. So I think, however many people, hey, can everybody just look and see what can you do and what do you think you could help to do right now in this season? And if you want to say, hey, for the next 3 weeks, you can certainly limit, or the next 4 weeks, we all want to step in and this person's going to do this and this person's going to do that. And we're doing it. It's not an option. We really want to do this because here's the reality. The tables are going to flip.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the other, someone else is going to be facing this too. So I think we set such a beautiful picture of grace and love in our businesses when we extend the authenticity of a real helping hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you recommend to having like set formal policies per se for bereavement in a company, or do we take it case by case and see like how is that employee reacting? What kind of support do they need? I guess just trying to figure out what is the right way to handle that is important as well.
I think for a large corporation, the first one,
Mm,
it kind of has to be. I think for a smaller company, you have the freedom to, because there's more intimacy and
Hmm.
maybe a smaller company. And so it is case by case.
Hmm.
You can see when someone's really been hit and they are traumatized, and you can see the struggle. And let me just say, if it's whatever the grief situation is, what we see is not necessarily all the grief there is.
Hmm.
There's layers to that grief. And so I think the sensitivity of that, and I love that you asked that question, because we really do talk with people who have businesses, trying to equip them. How do you prepare people and to have conversations about grief with your companies and your
Hmm.
employees? Because look, we need to have these discussions because everybody in here is going to go through some losses.
Right.
And so it's important. And I wish more companies would take the time to prepare their employees in that process of how we're going to try and, join forces when this happens. And let's talk about it. I don't want when an situation happens that you feel like you can't bring it to the company because we're bottom lining.
Hmm. Right. I was wondering too, when we want to maybe develop a culture of compassion and empathy and understanding and everything in our company before something even happens to anyone, because like you said, everyone's going to face this, but we never know when, and how people are going to react. So, do you have any tips on how a business can actually start to build that culture to be willing to step in and help? Because someone might be, well, if I have to go cover that person too, now I've got to fit a lot more work into my 40-hour work week too, right? So we want to build that. Any tips on how to do that?
Well, I think again, depending on your size, I think if you've got a core group of people, let's say you've got 5 people that you work with and y'all organize your office, you get those people and say, hey, let's sit down and talk about how we want to handle this as a company moving forward. And
Hmm.
let's get some input. And you can get it from the employees that are working with you and just say, hey, we're sending out and we would love to know your thoughts on this because we're putting something together. We want to be able to have these conversations. We want to be able to have things in place and be sensitive to the situations that we face day to day. That's one way. The second way to do that is if it's a large corporation again, I think that you actually have to have a certain group of people do that. But one of the things that, as I referred to again, I love it when corporations now are bringing in grief and trauma specialists like myself to address, the company employees.
Hmm.
These are some things you need to prepare for. These are things you need to have in place because grief is going to happen. And I'm sure many people have already experienced. But while we're talking about that, when this happens, these are things, these are tips, these are tools, these are resources that you can have. And this is your company's policy. And what we want you to know is that we're a resource also, because the
Hmm.
Sterling Rose Sanctuary is a resource for every business to have accessible to them. And I think companies should have those in already their back pocket to know this is a resource, and the people within the company should know, okay, there's a resource that I actually can go to. And they're not, I think that's part of grieving. There's so much you're trying to figure out. And if somebody has some concrete things, it makes it so much easier. Wouldn't you agree?
Hmm. Well, and I know some people have told me too, like, obviously, when you first have a loss, you're just dealing with it and there's so much emotion at that time. But people have also been telling me too, like, you're going to be in the middle of something, not even thinking about, the person that you've lost, and some memory is going to trigger that for you, right? And then you're going to be feeling that grief all over again too. So I guess there's this whole, process too, where we might be saying like, oh, we're going to give you a month or 2 months or whatever that might be, even to have like a more flexible schedule. But there's going to be times later on that something might hit again, and maybe it's around the anniversary of that loss or things too. So I guess any tips on that too, and like how to handle that over time for the entrepreneur when things look like they're getting better and then all of a sudden, something happens again.
I think awareness. I mean, you just brought that up. Being aware that, I mean, and honestly, I mean, you've experienced loss, I've experienced loss. So the reality is, yes, we're doing something and a song plays, a memory, someone says something, and the tears start flowing.
Mhm.
and you can be right in the midst of your work. It doesn't mean that that was planned for. I think in a moment like that, some people, as the process of grieving is a continuum, they're getting better. But I
Mhm.
think to have the awareness that sometimes it may cause them to shut down and not be able to continue to perform. And maybe at that point, hey, just step away and, you know, come back when you can. And, and
Mhm.
that day, take a couple of hours, return. Or if you're seeing on a continuum, because when you're speaking about that, I'm also thinking of the more severe case where someone really is incapable of performing, that they really may need to take a leave of absence to get some help. But the
Mhm.
person that, like we're talking about, I feel like in this conversation, is the one that's really, that grief is that ebb and flow of all of a sudden I'm being hit by it. So awareness, having that ability, and we tell people that are working, go tell your employee that, hey, I am not able to really function right now.
Mhm.
I need to step away. And to be honest, because the employer is going to understand, but if you're just sitting at your desk and you're being ineffective, and then that's where I think an employer starts feeling they're being taken advantage of. So
Mhm.
communication, and sometimes that's going to fall on the company when they're seeing things to say, hey, we're recognizing, and we'd really, pull them in and have a conversation. How can we be supportive here?
Mhm.
And sometimes it's as easy as they need to go have some professional help. But I
Mhm.
think the awareness has to be when every company, what's going on. And I know some companies are far larger than others, but even in large companies, you still have a hub of people that work with that individual. So
Right.
everybody should be trained.
Mhm. Well, I know we're coming to the end of the time that we have together. I've enjoyed the conversation because it's one that is important. People don't always want to talk about loss and grief too, but I'm so glad that we had the conversation. But I know there might be some people listening who are thinking, I would love to learn more, from what she's been talking about. How can listeners find you and connect with you?
They can go online, and we're at www.thesterlingrosesanctuary.us, and all resources are on there. We're available. They can fill out a form. We usually are back with someone within 24 hours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcia, for being a guest on my show again and talking on this topic. I appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners will find it very helpful too as they're navigating through grief themselves or they're helping a team member. To you, the listener, thank you for being here today. If this is a conversation that met you in a hard spot, I hope that it did remind you that you can depend on others to get that strength. And you can also help other team members that you're working with as well. And remember, if we want additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guests and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.